So long, Bowser!
Hey, what's up guys? Stan with the pink hair here, and along with Pokemon, there is no other gaming series that means as much to my family during the holidays as Super Mario. And look, I know, the latest offering from Nintendo meant to honor the Red Plumber's 35th anniversary is a bit of a sore subject for many for a plethora of reasons, myself included. But whether this is the best way to experience these legendary platformers or not, let's be real, this holiday season, a brand new generation of Nintendo fans will get to spend time with these titles, including Super Mario 64, which is what brings us here today. And full disclosure, though all the footage in this review is from that aforementioned anniversary collection, I also played the game on my old N64 in order to give as complete of an opinion as possible. It's just that it's gonna look better on a Switch. But that's enough babbling on. So let's make like Koopa the Quick as we race into Mario's first 3D adventure.
Mamma mia! Let's go!
After dominating the late 80s and early 90s with tens of millions of sales to his name, Mario, the most recognizable character in video games, slowly began to loosen his grip on the impressionable market as his absence throughout the decade grew. Sure, the Super Nintendo was stuffed full of Mario-centric spin-offs with popular titles like Super Mario Kart and Mario Paint selling well enough for the 16-bit system. However, when it came to the main series of games, aside from the Super Mario All-Stars compilation released in 1993, the Italian plumber seemed perfectly comfortable perched atop his industry throne as other platformers like Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog franchise entered and soon began to chip away at both his and Nintendo's once commanding lead in the console wars. He even began to take a back seat within his own franchises, as both the Super Mario World and Super Mario Land series of games opted to put the spotlight on both Yoshi and Wario respectively for their sequel adventures. But as technology began to improve and consumer trends began to evolve, Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator and longtime director of the mainline Mario series, found himself looking to reinvent his most iconic character once again for modern-day audiences, and he began by borrowing ideas from his most recent success, Star Fox. This 1993 rail shooter was Nintendo's first game to feature polygonal graphics, using its latest innovation, the Super FX chip. With this sudden leap in technology, Star Fox impressed consumers around the globe, and along with selling upwards of 4 million copies, confirmed to Miyamoto that the next installment in the core Mario franchise should experiment with this new perspective as well. And so, with a modest team of about 15 to 20 people, Nintendo EAD began proper development on Super Mario FX in September 1994. The initial concept was to have an isometric-style fixed camera, similar to Super Mario RPG, before Miyamoto and his team opted to instead try their hand at a free-roaming design with a rotating camera, an ambitious task that would require many grueling months to get just right. But Miyamoto was convinced that this was the best direction for both his Goomba-stomping protagonist and platforming in general. And after many years of dedicated work and a need to delay not only the game, but Nintendo's next-gen console as well, Super Mario 64 finally released as a launch title for the Nintendo 64 in Japan on June 23, 1996 to universal acclaim. Praised for its innovative approach to 3D exploration and platforming, as well as its exciting worlds and ambitious soundtrack, Super Mario 64 changed the way developers thought about the industry as a whole, and revolutionized not only the platforming genre, but redefined what a video game could be. Thanks to its immediate impact and cutting-edge approach to gameplay, many publications referred to Mario as the first true franchise to make a successful leap from 2D into the third dimension. And along with being considered one of the most influential games of all time, Super Mario 64 would go on to sell nearly 12 million copies over its lifetime, making it the best-selling release on the N64. Personally, I was incredibly young when 64 was released, but as I got more into gaming and the 90s came to a close, there was one universal truth that I understood above anything else. Wherever I went, no matter how many fantastic and groundbreaking offerings the system boasted, if somebody owned an N64, they also owned Super Mario 64. And more often than not, whether it was at a babysitter's, at Toys R Us, or in a friend's basement, as someone who didn't own an N64 until later in the console's lifespan, I would inevitably beg whoever it was I was with to let me play Mario for just a few more minutes. This might be difficult to explain nowadays, given how far the genre has come, but that was the power of Super Mario 64. Every level was colorful and mysterious, every song effortlessly cemented itself in my impressionable brain, and every single jump was as fun as racing through Green Hill Zone at top speed. The legacy it's left behind is one of joy and adoration across the board from all eras and fans throughout gaming. And through its various clones, successors, and the talented speedrunning community, its reputation as one of the best and most influential games of all time still holds strong today. But despite all of its historical significance and indisputable effect on gaming as a whole, is Mario's first true 3D adventure as impressive today as it was back then? And most importantly, is it still fun to play? Well, dust off your old wing cap and aim for the stars, as we take an in-depth look at Super Mario 64.
Let's go!
The narrative in most Super Mario adventures is sort of like the hopes of an officially backed release of Mother 3 in the West, which is to say, virtually non-existent. However, though shallow, Super Mario 64 does add some plot into the mix, even if it's not the game's main focus. We begin our campaign in the courtyard of Princess Peach's castle, after Mario, accompanied by a Lakitu cameraman, is invited to partake in some tasty desserts that his beloved princess has baked for him. However, it's made clear immediately that something is amiss, as it's revealed that Mario's eternal nemesis, Bowser, has invaded the castle and imprisoned both the princess and her many toad servants within its walls using the Power Stars, which are this game's primary MacGuffin and apparent power source for everything at the heart of the Mushroom Kingdom. And now it's up to the mustached hero to run, jump, and kick his way through the castle's various worlds via its interdimensional paintings in order to defeat King Koopa and recover enough Power Stars to save the princess. Once freed from her stained glass prison, she'll give our portly protagonist a kiss as well as that cake she promised once upon a time. And with Bowser defeated and peace returning once again to the Mushroom Kingdom, the credits begin to play as the game comes to a triumphant end. Now, obviously, that's incredibly lackluster when compared to the types of games I typically review on this channel. But in the case of Super Mario 64, it works as well as you'd expect. In 1996, players didn't need some sort of epic tale of good versus evil and a fight for the princess's soul on the line, because that wasn't the point. The main theme of Mario 64 is quite literally adventure in its purest, most unrefined form, and distracting players from explorative elements in favor of dialogue and character development would only serve to get in the way of this message. There's a reason why this was the game I always asked my friends to play back in the 90s, and it's because its lack of complex narrative works to its benefit and allows players to immediately jump into the fun with nothing holding them back. In fact, considering I never owned the game until many years later, it wouldn't be until the release of its DS remake in 2004 that I would even realize there was a story at all. And even replaying it today and collecting every Power Star possible, I think it's a wonderful and straightforward experience, despite lacking in the one area most modern-day single-player campaigns tend to excel at. The main emphasis here are the characters, camera controls, and explorative elements, and when it comes to the former, I think Mario 64 once again does a phenomenal job. Again, there's no real development to speak of, but considering the phrase "it's a me Mario" still permeates the gaming landscape even today,
It's me, Mario!
I think it's safe to say it did its job and then some. This is the first core game in the series to utilize proper voice acting, with Charles Martinet defining the role and adding some personality into the formerly mute plumber. And along with the titular hero, this is the game where many of Mario's most iconic enemies would discover their voices. To me, the most memorable of these new battle cries is probably the Chain Chomp's bark, as well as the Boo's chilling shriek while they terrify their fleshy adversary. And it's my opinion that the idea to add unique sounds to these characters went a long way in making these already well-known enemies even more distinctive. Also, as an aside, can you believe that upon the game's release, Miyamoto gave a statement essentially saying that Tamagotchi, Bandai's virtual pets that dominated the late 90s, had more character in their multi-pixel designs than the entire cast of Super Mario 64. Which, yeah, like the rest of the world, I was obsessed with my digital keychain companion back then for sure, but at no point did my 2-inch buddy ever make an impression on me as great as...
So long, Bowser!
I'm just saying. But anyways, with a story thinner than Mario's paper-crafted parallel, this section was always destined to be short, so why don't we get into the meat and potatoes of this experimental adventure as we shuffle our way into the pros.
Let's go!
Starting things off with any feature aside from 64's gameplay would be a crime, so let's begin by discussing Mario himself. Translating the well-known icon into a brand new realm of movement must have been the most difficult task for Nintendo's trusted team of programmers, but I'm glad to report that nearly a quarter century later, Mario is still as fun as ever as you navigate the overworld avatar throughout the castle. It can sometimes take a little while to get used to the physics of Mario 64, especially compared to how he plays throughout later installments, but from the moment you step foot into the game's very first level, you feel confident and in control. At the beginning of your adventure, you're likely to experiment with many of the slippery plumber's most intuitive motions, but as you make your way through the castle's first area, you're likely to keep pushing boundaries as you begin to warm up to the game's many controls. Thanks to the openness of many of the earliest courses, you're sure to have discovered Mario's fancy new triple jump, a useful tool for gaining vertical momentum which he can perform after building up enough speed. But as you continue to experiment with his mobility, you'll eventually discover more athletic weapons in his arsenal, as you begin to master the backflip, slide, and my personal favorite, the long jump, which makes racing through levels a breeze. And unless you want to experience one of the most heartbreaking game over screens in gaming, you'll have to conquer all these moves quickly, because this time around, there are no super mushrooms or stars that can extend your life expectancy. Instead, Mario now has a life ring that decreases as you get attacked by foes or take environmental damage, and once it's depleted, you're forced to exit the stage as Mario loses a life. The good news, however, is that Mario must be part dolphin or something, because along with collecting coins scattered throughout the various stages, catching his breath along the water's surface will help replenish his health, which makes for a more insulated adventure than in previous titles. This is also the game that introduced one of Mario's most notable abilities in the wall jump. One of the less obvious but rather important skills you'll need to learn if you want to reclaim every power star available. But like any great platformer, it's the sense of freedom that players will gain through their personal execution of these various movement options to both explore and sometimes even bend the game to their will that makes Mario 64 worth beating more than 2 decades later. When I first stumbled out onto Bob-omb Battlefield, I felt clunky and hamstrung in my movement, and embarrassingly had a tougher time than I'd care to admit taking down the game's first boss. However, by the time I got to Tall Tall Mountain, one of the ladder stages in the castle, I was moving and grooving around the environment with ease, and using every ability at my disposal to clear missions as fast and with as little exertion as possible. Most of my enjoyment at this point wasn't coming from defeating enemies and collecting stars, but rather pushing the boundaries of each specifically crafted world in order to see just how far I could exploit Mario and the game itself within each particular environment. The freedom to discover and take on missions in whichever order I wanted, and setting self-imposed goals and restrictions to test my abilities and mark my growth as a player was my favorite part of this playthrough. And I think it speaks to the sensational job Miyamoto and his team did in crafting yet another uniquely Mario experience. But of course, no Super Mario adventure is complete without the addition of power-ups, and 64 doesn't fail to deliver. Unlike past games, there are no fire flowers or Tanuki suits in sight, but instead 3 new temporary power-ups in the form of caps that will allow Mario to fly, as well as change the state of his body and enable him to interact with the world around him in new and exciting ways. These caps are unlocked by stepping on a switch outside of regular gameplay, and once activated can be obtained through corresponding blocks scattered throughout the multiple stages, and in some cases, even the overworld itself. Personally, aside from the mushrooms and stars found in the original NES Classic, when I think of power-ups in a Super Mario game, it's the wing cap that springs to mind first. It's similar in concept to the cape feather found in Super Mario World, but due to its built-in timer, isn't quite as exploitable. And it's my opinion that it's the wing cap that does the best job of the 3 at conveying the game's primary themes of adventure, especially within a 3D space. It's just so much fun, whether you activate it through a triple jump or by blasting out of a cannon at top speed. There's really nothing else in the game that offers players as much freedom. And although both the metal and vanishing caps are a welcome addition, I can't help but feel like they're purely situational, with very little impact on the actual world and your sense of exploration. And as I've stated a few times now, exploration is the heartbeat of your adventure, as you'll be stomping your way through 15 new stages, each with their own enemies to defeat and gimmicks to discover. No 2 courses are alike, and whether you're outmaneuvering an eel in Jolly Roger Bay, or riding a magic carpet through Rainbow Ride, get it? You'll need to explore every possible area and find each level 7 power stars if you want to put an end to Bowser's wrath for good. Now, in today's era, with more advanced hardware at their disposal, developers might be considered lazy for giving players a little connective tissue between environments and instead relegating them to portraits that Mario can enter with little to no effect on the castle itself. Heck, many of Rare's late 90s platformers are still discussed and praised today due in part to excelling at this very concept. But once again, as a hub world and innovator in the 3D space, the way Princess Peach's castle is set up was absolutely mind-blowing at the time, and allowed the developers to create variety and explore whatever bold ideas and mechanics they wanted to without being confined by the environments around them. And this stroke of imaginative simplicity created a setting so well known that the series has revisited this hub world on numerous occasions due to its impact and effect on players. And the stages themselves are instantly recognizable as well. Well, most of them. Aside from Bob-omb Battlefield, which serves as a perfect introduction to the new 3-dimensional gameplay and the game's various mechanics, some of Mario's most iconic settings are from this installment, including Whomp's Fortress, Big Boo's Haunt, and Tiny Huge Island, which, although similar to Mario 3's Giant Land, stands enough on its own to always leave me in awe at the creative use of scope and design that Mario 64 effortlessly provides. On the surface, you can tell many of these stages were created for the sake of variety. There's 2 ice levels, a few areas with water, a world inexplicably drowned in fire and lava, because of course there is, but it's how each setting utilizes its unique mechanics that really elevate them into something greater. For example, Tick-Tock Clock, one of the final levels found in the game, is a pretty standard vertical platformer where most of the time, your goal is to keep moving higher along the various temporal theme blocks to reach the next available power star. And at its core, this is a perfect summation of the 14th stage's overall design philosophy. However, depending on where the minute hand lands as you enter the clock face to access the level, the stage's speed will change drastically, affecting the difficulty of your climb. And in some cases, there are certain stars that are nearly impossible to collect without ensuring that time has stopped completely before you've entered the stage at all. And it's little things like this that go a long way in really creating memorable experiences for the player, and further showcase the themes of freedom and adventure, with many of these specific level gimmicks complementing the use of power-ups and Mario's natural maneuverability to produce a never-ending playground of imagination that almost always rewards trial and error. Now, there's also a few areas that admittedly don't hold up as well to modern scrutiny and often result in frustration rather than fun. But for the most part, all 15 stages have something innovative and exciting to decipher and overcome, with my personal 3 favorites being Lethal Lava Land, Snowman's Land, and the aforementioned Tiny Huge Island. Also, the 3 fixed camera courses before your fights with Bowser are all great challenges for where they take place during the campaign, and kind of feel like the closest thing these games offer to the 2D platformers of Mario's past. And oh man, the music. Koji Kondo never disappoints, but compared to Super Mario World, which mostly featured inventive remixes of one iconic melody, this soundtrack is perfect at conveying the settings found within each painting using only a few simple notes, and provides a sense of atmosphere required of such an ambitious free-roaming style game. The water levels are scored with an ambience that provides a sense of calm against the raging waves and underwater inhabitants threatening your progression, while the instrumentation heard throughout Shifting Sandland comes off as paradoxically barren and filled with life as the stage itself. And that's without even mentioning how notable and ingrained certain tracks like Peach's Castle and the Bob-omb Battlefield themes have become in the public consciousness. But my favorite track in the entire game has got to be Bowser's Road, a relentless composition that immediately lets players know that they're now outside of the castle's charm and at the mercy of the brutal king and his dozens of minions. Also, the sound design in this game is brilliant, with everything from the battle effects to obtaining a star adding to the immersion and scale seamlessly. But finally, the last 2 things I want to discuss in this section involve both the level of mystery and exploitability that in tandem have caused this game to far exceed its natural shelf life and remain relevant in the minds of both new and older fans alike, even in today's busier climate. Beginning with the former, given the size of the world as well as its lengthy development cycle, Super Mario 64, like many of its 90s contemporaries, was bound to generate debate and mystery among its millions of fans. For starters, the fact that Yoshi was added onto the castle's roof as a bonus for players who successfully collected all 120 power stars created a sense of discovery far greater than anything else the game could have attempted. After all, if Yoshi, one of the most popular and beloved companions in the Mario universe, had been hidden away the entire time, then what other characters and Easter eggs might be possible to find if players dug hard enough? This revelation led to thousands of discussions and posts across playgrounds and online forums alike, debating how much content in the game might still be undiscovered by diehard fans, with many boasting that certain characters and secret endings could be unlocked by accomplishing ridiculous tasks like collecting every coin in the game. And that's without even getting into the entire L is Real 2401 conspiracy, which suggested that at one point Luigi, Mario's slender younger brother, was a playable character in the game. Something that only mere months ago, at the time of this recording, was finally proven true after a mass beta leak of the game found its way onto the internet 24 years and 1 month after 64's initial release in Japan. And given all these claims of undiscovered treasure, as well as the incredible mobility and sense of exploration that I've discussed at length already, it was no surprise that Super Mario 64 would eventually find a second life as one of the most successful and infamous titles within the speedrunning community. And honestly, it's well deserved. It's simple enough to get into and understand within a few short minutes, with many wannabe speedrunners able to shave off hours of gameplay with fun exploits like the Infinite Staircase almost immediately. But given the depth of harder to execute glitches, coupled with Mario's seemingly infinite athleticism, it's created a recipe for speedrunning gold, with many of the top chefs in this spicy community attaining online fame for their discoveries and accomplishments over the years. Now, I'll be honest, the entire speedrunning thing, though entertaining, isn't really within my wheelhouse, nor is it really my place as somebody not involved to go into it at length. But if you're interested in learning more about this particular aspect of the game, then please check out Simply, a streamer and YouTuber who loves this sort of thing, for a way more detailed education on everything this game-breaking community has to offer. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that makes this game magical even all of these years later. And to nobody's surprise, most of its success comes from the elements of freedom and how they can be explored at the player's leisure. But what happens when certain issues impede and dilute that sweeping sense of uncompromisable adventure? Well, it's time to answer that question and discuss 64's faults as we jump kick our way into the con section.
Let's go!
When it comes to Mario's 64-bit adventure, or actually 32-bit, but who's counting, there's one horrifying monster who's going to make you suffer more than any other enemy found in the game, Bowser included, and that's the camera. Yes, I know that this was a wholly original experiment at the time, and yes, I'm aware that there are ways to play this game today with more control over the camera than how it was originally intended. But let's be clear, playing Super Mario 64 in the 21st century with the original hardware is an exercise in patience. When I first saw that Lakitu, one of Mario's former enemies, would be assisting him as a silent sidekick throughout the campaign, I wondered what could have possessed this proud member of Bowser's army to change allegiances so easily. But after playing a few stages in this otherwise brilliant adventure, it began to make sense, as I constantly found myself fighting with this cloud-based companion more than I ever did when he was my foe. If you are somebody who's never played this game before, make no mistake, you're going to miss the simplest stars at the very last moment thanks to this camera. There are times where its nonsensical positioning and constant repositioning for seemingly no reason is going to make you want to throw your controller across the room. And if you combine this mercurial mechanic with how slippery Mario can sometimes be while traversing these often strange and complex lands, it can often leave you feeling disillusioned with the game. Because many times you're going to do everything right. You're going to approach a mission with caution and patience, only to be rewarded with an endless fall into oblivion for your troubles. And even if it was exceptional and miraculous at the time, this camera system made me come to loathe certain aspects of this game. Specifically, any level with a bottomless pit involved, which is unfortunately like the entire back half of this entire campaign. Now, I know what you're saying, but Stan, the camera, while flawed, can be corrected with enough patience, and after you get used to it, the only real issue must be you, either rushing or not paying attention to your surroundings. And honestly, in some cases, you'd be absolutely right. Mario 64 requires your acceptance of its world and concentration of its mechanics in a way that most modern platformers would never ask of its players. But as I'm sure you can already guess, that's the problem. I'm not reviewing this game in 1996. And even in boss fights, especially in Bowser's case, it can be the difference between a quick and easy triumph or constant frustration over a few non-adjustable inches. Like, Bowser is actually laughable in how simplistic his throwing matches are, which for players looking for a fun challenge after the exciting levels that precede them, makes for disappointing battles with Mario's infamous arch-rival. But this is all made worse by how such a simple and mindless task is only made difficult because of how the game controls. This is most frustrating, however, when it comes to some of the castle's secret stars, with a specific example being the one obtained using the wing cap in the final parts of the game. At this point, I was feeling really good about my abilities, but I must have replayed this ridiculous level 6 or 7 times before I finally nabbed my shining prize. And whether intended by the development team or not, I believe the main reason for taking so long was my annoyances compounding until I didn't even want to try it anymore. See, in this special level, you're tasked with collecting 8 red coins, something you do in every single stage at some point, and usually not too difficult. But in this stage, you have to guide Mario through a vertical tunnel of various clouds using the wing cap and cannons with very little room for error. Now, on its own, this probably doesn't sound all too bad, but I swear, this section was designed to enforce the maximum amount of punishment if you fail, because each time you come up short, the game thought it would be a good idea to drop you where else but in the courtyard. It doesn't matter if you have 99 lives, if you slip up here just once, you're done. And you'll need to proceed back through every door and climb up every staircase just to get another attempt. Which, although not a game over, literally possesses the same consequences as one, making me question what the point of actual game overs even was. And this entire experience is all made worse by such an uncompromising camera. Again, I love the wing cap, it's incredibly fun to use, but in such an enclosed space with the goal of moving vertically instead of with exploration in mind, it results in incredibly clunky gameplay that'll make you consider just giving up on completion altogether. And aside from the camera controls, this is the only other part of Mario 64 that I genuinely feel is a bit archaic, and it's the arbitrary sense of padding the game forces onto its players if they want to reach Yoshi and collect every power star. Aside from the 1 star you get by collecting 100 coins in each stage, something that was also surely implemented just to prolong the experience, you're never allowed to get more than 1 star at a time. Meaning in some instances, you'll discover or unlock multiple stars during one run-through, only to be forced to make a decision on which one you want at that time before having to go through the entire level all over again. And look, I get once again that this is Mario 64, one of the progenitors of the 3D platforming experience. So what I'm saying is a bit harsh, as there was clearly lots of potential left to uncover in the genre. But to me at least, it's when all of these issues are compounded that I find myself wishing for something more modern to play instead. Trying to get the 100 coin star on Rainbow Ride should be difficult, of course. It's the final stage of the game after all. But my god, why make it this particular on a level that rolls out so slowly and has almost zero room for error? Seriously, even after I figured out how to traverse my way through the areas needed for most of these coins and managed to avoid plummeting to my death, I could still see a perfectly fine run fall apart because the camera made it difficult to reach these specific blue coins. But of course, I still had to proceed through the entire thing again if I wanted to grab the rest of the stage's stars. And I guess that's the one defense I should provide, that nobody forced me to aim for 100% completion here. You can beat the game and rescue Peach with a measly 70 stars if you really want to, so nothing is really lost if you value pace over perfection. But again, the issue wasn't that this particular star was the challenge, it was that the worst elements found in this game, the camera controls, the mindless padding, and the merciless form of replayability all combined together in not just this instance, but many others to create moments where I stopped having fun, where they not only got in the way, but were in direct conflict with the themes and messages this game exudes. And it makes it difficult at times to want to explore everything that a player possibly can in fear of the often unfair consequences. And to me at least, in a video game that vastly prioritizes gameplay over narrative, that makes it a harder decision for me to recommend overall. But honestly, that's my biggest gripe here, and once again, it's something I believe is born more out of an easier, more spoiled mentality towards gaming, and I do genuinely think that a little pain and punishment can go a long way in creating memories. I'd just rather they came from a place of internal skill and growth, rather than a world that at times seems programmed to exist in complete opposition to those core elements and fundamental themes. But now, with all of my grievances out in the open like a hat-stealing vulture in the unforgiving sun, I think now's the time to wrap this up as we reach the final verdict.
Let's go!
Look, Super Mario 64 is not perfect. Going back and playing it for the first time in years made me realize how well specific aspects of its gameplay aged, and how others that I was certain would be a blast ultimately fell short of my admittedly weighty expectations. But that's not why this installment is important. It excels because more than anything, it's still extremely fun to pick up and play. It's so easy to immediately hop in at any time, and within minutes have a solid understanding of what you're doing, where you need to go next, and most importantly, how you move throughout its vast imaginative worlds. This is a campaign that, aside from the constant war with the camera, allows freedom of movement in every possible aspect, and sends a clear message to players that when it comes to a wealth of 90s platformers, Mario not only did it first, but still to this day arguably did it the best. And that, along with its noticeable imprint on gaming and its continued success through speedrunning, has made it stand the test of time and preserved its legacy for generations still to come. However, on the other hand, the camera is a nightmare with no easy fix at times, and some of the decisions and mechanics regarding exploration are counterintuitive to the game's greatest strengths and overall themes of freedom and adventure. It's also honestly not worth going out of your way to 100% unless you really love Yoshi or can't get enough of the campaign, and in my opinion is best approached with the idea of just having fun while kicking some Goomba ass. And so, taking that all into consideration, I'm left awarding Super Mario 64 with a B. It holds up so much better than it has any right to, and there's no way playing it even today will leave you with anything less than a goofy smile on your face. But at the same time, I do feel like, especially for modern audiences, it's much better to experience in smaller bursts, and at the end of the day, I'd have a difficult time recommending it with the same level of aplomb as current platforming masterpieces like A Hat in Time or Mario Odyssey. Regardless though, if you agree with my assessment or not, one thing is certain, and that's that after a woefully long hiatus away from the spotlight, Mario forced his entire genre back into the mainstream in a big way, and inspired countless developers and audiences across the world to acknowledge that the king of video games would likely never be dethroned, no matter how much time passes. And despite its flaws, Super Mario 64 will continue to be remembered as not only the game that reaffirmed his industry dominance, but also as one of the most sacred and most important video games of all time. And there you have it, Super Mario 64. And as I alluded to throughout the video, I think this is one that everybody should experience at least once if you're interested in the historical side of video games. Next up, we'll be hopping on a plane and unpacking our Hawaiian shirts as I delve into the heart of Super Mario Sunshine, a game that I've surprisingly never played. I'm sorry, I know that segue was a bit misleading as there's still some other tropical themed games left for me to review, but I've been on a Mario binge, guys, and I promise once that's out of my system, I will hunker down and give you the Gen 7 reviews you've been patiently waiting for. So thank you for your patience. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell if you haven't done so already. Let me know your thoughts and experiences on Super Mario 64 in the comments section down below. And as I always say, happy hunting, baby rhinos. Peace. Wondering why my hair is pink? Well, it's because of my amazing members who've helped support this channel no matter how long my Pokemon reviews take to release. Thank you to everyone who currently makes up the Ultra Squad, and if you'd like to help support the channel, get early access to these videos, and have your name appear alongside these wonderful people, then please consider signing up with the link in the description below. You can unlock a ton of awesome perks, and it starts at only $2 per month. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, feel free to join my Discord, and I'll see you guys next time in Super Mario Sunshine.
Spaghetti. Ah, ravioli. Ah, mamma mia.